Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. Today guys, we're going to do some brief technical analysis on XRP to see what is going to happen next in my opinion. As we get into this video, if you find it useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, do subscribe, tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so, you will be kept up to date with everything that we do here. Right, with that said, done that out of the way, let's dive into this technical analysis on XRP. So we're going to start things off with the weekly chart, guys, just to talk through the kind of structure that we're seeing here. Ultimately, there is a Fibonacci retracement tool just over here on the left-hand side. And this is where we are taking the all-time high and the bear market low. And by taking those two things together, we can see that we can reach up to about $15.91. Of course, that doesn't really take into consideration the lawsuit or the recent trading activity. So for me personally, I think this has to kind of be applied with caution, right? We do obviously talk about 1,300% in gains, and that does get us to that $16 level, right? But obviously for this to happen, I think we have to see a settlement with the lawsuit, or the lawsuit has to just disappear, right? I think if we want to see that, we need to have the lawsuit kind of taken care of, pushed out of the way, and dealt with one way or another, right? Win, lose, draw, settle, it doesn't really matter. We just want to see an outcome of it. With an outcome, the world can move on knowing whatever XRP is, be that security, be that exchange token, as we refer to it here in the UK, utility token, etc. Okay, so it doesn't matter what it's called or how it needs to go ahead and proceed in the US, as long as it gets that clarity. With that clarity, I am pretty confident that it will go up towards that $15.91. The question really that you have is it going to happen in time for the end of this bull run to actually start to see this surge? Now, there's going to be a lot of FOMO in once the settlement happens, or once the case is actually pulled to a close. I personally think it will be a settlement because of everything that's been going on with the lawsuit. I think ultimately that's where it's likely to end up. With that being said, though, we need to see that happen, and once that has happened, we're going to see a huge surge of FOMO, which will take us up to those levels there. It'll be an absolute feeding frenzy, and I think everyone's going to be so surprised by the amount of gains that are going to happen once that lawsuit comes to a close. Of course, only if it happens within the bull run. If, however, the lawsuit is dragged out, which is what I feel is the whole reason behind it, XRP is not going to participate as well. It is still going to do well-ish. It's going to do okay, but it's not going to be the $16 target that we've been talking about. And I'll get into what that looks like in a moment. Otherwise, this weekly chart is looking pretty good. We obviously have interesting structure forming. We are holding our support of $1.07 really well. Currently, at the point of recording this video, $1.09. Up here, we can see that we are overbought, which is pulling back down a little bit. And again, this is an area that we're pretty familiar with on the weekly chart here. Many of the other altcoins actually spend quite a bit of time up in the overbought area, but XRP, for whatever reason, every single time it approaches this area, something major happens and pulls it down. Okay, so very frustrating stuff. Like, we take a look at where we were with the the flare snapshot, and then obviously the lawsuit getting dropped. It basically just dragged us all the way down. We had a good surge to the upside in the new year, but again, it could have been so much better had exchanges not delisted and all that other kind of nonsense. With that being said, Bitcoin then pulled us down once we were back up in this overbought area, bringing us back to the oversold, right? So right now we're at this kind of position where we can go up or down depending on what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin decides to pull down, then unfortunately we'll expect to pull down with it. The question will be, where does it actually fall? I don't think it's going to go terribly too far if that is the case. And I do think that all these things that we are hearing about, Bitcoin potentially dropping down to 38K, I'm not 100% convinced on just yet, and I can go through why I think this in a moment. But ultimately, I think actually we have a better chance of actually moving up in the longer term anyway. So overall, the structure is actually quite good, although there are lots of volatility here, and I think this is down to various different things, right? Obviously, the lawsuit getting dropped here, a pump and dump over here, Bitcoin's correction here, Bitcoin's volatility here, right? So we haven't had the most, the best start to the bull run when it comes to XRP, which is very, very unfortunate. But that being said, with a settlement coming in, this thing is absolutely going to fly, in my opinion. So overall, the weekly chart could be better, but it could also be a lot worse. So it's okay, nothing brilliant, but it's okay. If we jump down into our our daily chart, this is where we start to see some of that most recent kind of price action, right? So this here, this Fibonacci takes our current performance, the high up here and the low down here. And this actually shows us that we are more than likely going to end up here without, if their lawsuit continues the way that it is under current circumstances, XRP has been performing this way, and therefore is likely to push up to about $6.68, okay? So not quite where people think things are going, but under the current structure of how things have been performing, that is where it's likely to end up, just from a probability point of view. Okay, so mathematically, from that high to that low, that is where it's indicating. Right now, we can see that we're trading sideways really heavily across our support line of the $1.07, right? And in here, you can see that the daily is oversold, right? We had this push to the upside and then Bitcoin pulled us down. And what was interesting about this push to the upside here is it took us right to the 618, okay? The 618 of the Fibonacci retracement tool. Again, these are the three areas that we really want to focus in on, the 618, 702, 786. These are the areas that we're going to find the most amount of struggling. And once we get the closed candle above that 786, that should be the next signal to take us to the next level. Overall, XRP has got to battle its way through what is down here first, okay? And obviously it has the potential on this daily chart to do this, but we just need to have that momentum and sentiment in the space to allow it to push back to the upside. So overall, XRP has good chance to do this, but also we need to see a few things happen first. Okay, so this is the point that I do want to kind of talk about a couple of things. Okay, before we jump down into the smaller time frames, I want to talk about, first of all, this tweet here from Crypto. And basically here we can see that he's talking about the Wyckoff distribution and how we see an accumulation and all that kind of stuff. And that's just fine. I mean, I did follow this for a while. But we do have to acknowledge why I think this is not going to pull back down to 38K. And one is because this PS down here, if you will, this low wick, and this is your low point initially. Then you come up for your secondary test in phase B. We did all of this already, right? We've kind of been through all of this with you guys. Then you have the spring event, right? Spring event is one of a possible scenario. It doesn't always happen. But the fact that he's called this the spring event is interesting because the spring always has to be lower than this wick over here. So technically speaking, this spring is not lower than this one. So therefore, I'm a bit confused as to why he thinks this will be pulling back down. Actually, this is invalidated. In fact, all of this is invalidated, this Wyckoff accumulation period. So for me, this pattern isn't quite there. Now, obviously, the alternative to a spring would be this scenario, but I think we would have rejected a little bit higher up here. But I haven't actually looked at it for a while, but I'm pretty certain it's not necessarily this particular pattern that we're looking at overall for Bitcoin. So although he is calling out, the potential to drop down to 38K, etc., it's not something that I'm necessarily agree with coming to fruition. But it's crypto, anything can happen. But overall, when I actually then take that and I think, okay, in order to see a 38K Bitcoin, we obviously have to see some inflows on exchanges, right? Yeah, it's pretty standard. We over here, we saw that on Glassnode during May, we saw the kind of inflows that happened in order to bring us down. And they were very, very high. But yet we're down here, right the way down here, right? Very, very small amount of inflows onto exchanges at the moment. Now, we are 24 hours behind with Glassnode, so obviously it will take a little bit of time to see if things are building up on there, but ultimately the inflows are relatively small in comparison to where they were previously. Obviously, we can go a little bit further than this, and we can, of course, actually take a look at the in-house volume on exchanges. And here you can see the differences of this, right? We obviously pushed the volumes up most recently in August, and then the volumes on exchanges have completely plummeted all the way back down. So if we are to see a 38K Bitcoin, there obviously has to be a large amount actually put onto exchanges to allow us to actually see that. So if we take this one, for example, this actually then shows you the percentage of balances at exchanges, right? So here we can see the kind of the pattern of the flow for the entire year, right? The percentage of the balance has been decreasing. We then pushed it up during that kind of redistribution phase where Bitcoin was falling down in value. And now we've seen Bitcoin surge back to the upside. We're at an all-time low area this year for the balance on exchanges, right? So from a percentage point of view, they've only got 13% of the balance, 13% on exchanges. So overall, it's actually looking more and more likely that it's not going to go down to 38k. So I would worry about people who use leverage in this kind of scenario, because they'll be looking at the tweets on Twitter. They'll be looking at various different influencers that might pick that up and talk about Bitcoin going down to 38k and actually go and put short positions on it. And then obviously we've seen this before where people were shorting it just as we broke the 30k level, as in everyone was thinking it was going to go down, only to see Bitcoin actually surge back to the upside massively, liquidating their positions. And this is where that manipulation comes in. Institutions don't care which direction to put it in. They can push the price down, they can pull the price up, right? And using leverage puts you at a high risk in that kind of scenario, because if you're shorting it, you're basically gambling, saying that the price is going down. And if a lot of people do that, let's say the majority of people do that for Bitcoin, the institutions will be able to see this, and then they'll just say, we'll just push the price up, liquidating all the short positions, and the money will flow to the institutions, right? Because they're buying it up, and they're buying up all the fear that gets liquidated. And likewise, if the majority go long, then they'll just push the price down, right? So this is the kind of level of manipulation that you have with institutions until they're completely filled their bags, and the percentage of the market is actually, sitting with Bitcoin, and the liquidity that's available to them disappears. They won't let this thing fly. So for me, I'm not seeing the level of inflows, and the percentage on exchanges are so low, I cannot see 38k myself. But there is, of course, a knock-on effect to all this talk. Okay, and that is when we start taking a look at the advice.io dashboard. Here, there is machine learning, artificial intelligence to help us understand the underlying value of cryptocurrency. Link in the description below, free to sign up. Sign up, you'll get more insight into what is going on. So here we've got XRP, and XRP is in an extreme state of fear right now. It's a rating of D. So what we're seeing here is basically a lot of fear around Bitcoin. A lot of fear around Bitcoin. And as a result of that, a lot of fear for the altcoins as well. Okay, so what you have is a fear and greed index dropping to extreme fear for XRP, right the way down at the bottom here. This is not good for the sentiment and able to push up the price. People are going to find it very, very difficult to invest in a cryptocurrency, at least from a retail investor perspective, if they do not understand what is going on the bigger macro picture. So overall, there's a lot of fear here, which means we're not likely to push up very well. And in fact, they're more than likely going to sell their XRP in this scenario. Now, when we actually dive into the other areas of the technicals, we can see the 𝗕𝗎 ratio is an A2 rating, no problem with liquidity. We take a look at the peak end value demand of B2, pretty moderate, not too bad. We take a look at the moving averages, A2, the second best rating this platform can give, so nothing wrong at all with the moving averages. The profitability, the return on investment is an A1, the best it can be. The Sharpe ratio is an A2, so risk-reward ratio, there's no risk-reward issue here. It's an A2 rating, right? So the anomaly really comes in saying that there's fear, but there shouldn't be fear there. Right? The underlying data from this AI is saying liquidity, not a problem. Moving averages, not a problem. Profitability, not a problem. Risk-reward ratio, not a problem. So why is there so much fear? It's very, very odd, right? So now we're going to jump down into the next level for our chart here. Let's jump into the hourly. And on this hourly chart, guys, we can see that we were tracking nicely. We got rejected from the 618. Bitcoin pulled back, creating a bit of fear. We then started to push up, and we got rejected again. Too much recovery, pulled right the way back down. And now we've been trading sideways down here for quite some time. And this is where the problem now lies. Because we are overbought on our hourly stochastic RSI, we are looking to pull back. Okay, now that momentum needs to be pulled out of our stochastic RSI, but we are incredibly close to our trend line. Okay, so the likelihood here is that we are going to fall back, and what we want is to support this. We want this trend line to support us on that journey to the downside. However, with the amount of fear in this space, I would worry that actually if we start falling, we're going to fall harder and harder and lose our $1.07 support line and potentially pull back down to the $1.04 area. Okay, so that basically would invalidate our trend line altogether. Okay, so that would be very unfortunate for XRP because we want a bounce and we want to push back to the upside. I just do not think the sentiment is there yet. So I am expecting short-term volatility here on the hourly chart. Okay, and it could mean that we bounce around quite a bit in here for quite some time. So if you're a day trader and you have your own charts and things like that, this is probably going to be your best friend, right? Because you're going to be able to basically trade this area for quite some time, I would have thought, until Bitcoin kind of sorts its sentiment out, at least for another week or so. And then from here, you're going to be able to then start to see a nice slow and steady kind of push to the upside in the long term, because we have no problem when it comes to our weekly chart. We haven't really got any problems when it comes to our daily chart. And ultimately, I do feel that we're going to see a settlement with XRP, and the Ripple SEC lawsuit, right? So overall, I think we're going to end up in a really good, strong position. But I am kind of expecting some short-term volatility with the space, being the fact that Bitcoin's doing what Bitcoin is doing, people talking about Bitcoin dropping down, and obviously creating a lot of fear in the space around many of these cryptocurrencies, including XRP. So I am expecting a short-term pullback. I would like to see it bounce from our trend line, but I'm not optimistic on that. That would be ideal, and I cannot see this being an ideal situation at the moment. So I am expecting maybe a pullback down to the $1.04, and then from there we should hopefully surge back up again. But we will probably find resistance, somewhere up in this zone here, and then pull back down again. So I'm expecting short-term volatility for a week or so, and then I think from there we should be in a pretty good position to continue the push to the upside. But overall, that is XRP, and it's not positive news on the shorter time frames, but the larger time frames are pretty good. I think we've got some interesting things that we have to look forward to. So as a long-term investor in XRP, I'm just holding tight, and we should be seeing some interesting price moves in the near future. Just prepare ourselves for this short-term volatility, and we should hopefully be fine in the next little while. Guys, that is my update. If you have found this useful and informative, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that. Subscribe, tap the bell, select all notifications, and in doing so, you won't miss another update. With this said, done, and out of the way, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.